fellow geeks, and welcome back to Running Geek Girl. My name is Heather, and I'm glad you're here today because it's time to take another look at some podcasts that I listen to while I run. Now, if you missed the first video that I did of this sometime last year, I'm going to put a link up here and down in the description so that you can take a look at what I was listening to at the time. A lot of those podcasts are still going on, so I am still listening to them today, but I have also added some other ones to listen to that I thought that I would suggest to you in case you were looking for something to listen to while out on the run. By the way, if you're new here and you haven't subscribed, make sure that you click on that subscription link down below so that you don't miss any of the running content that I have coming out all the time. And now that you've clicked that button, with that being said, let's jump into the podcast that I am currently listening to. All right, first of all, let's talk about running podcasts, of course. The first one that I want to tell you about is the Rosser Runs podcast. And Rosser Runs is also a YouTube channel. It is run by Brian Rosser. He has an amazing story about how he came to be a runner. He now does ultras, and he does a lot of fundraising to help prevent suicide, which is an amazing cause. But he has a podcast in which he talks to various runners and tells you a little bit about himself, and it helps you to realize that every runner has a story. Next up would be the Runner's Roundup. If you are familiar with the YouTube channels Dan Runs, That Running Guy, and Bender Runs, the three of them have joined forces. They get together every once in a while to do a live stream, and then they release it in podcast form, in which they talk about everything running, from shoes to training plans to fueling. It's all in there. It's all very fun, and it's definitely worth a listen. Next up, we're going to be talking about some story podcasts. It's when they take a story, they put it in binaural format so that you can hear everything happening around you as you listen. The first one that I want to talk about is called The Oyster. The Oyster takes place in the future where the Earth has become an unlivable wasteland, and a certain number of humans have been chosen to retreat to underground bunkers in order to carry on and make sure that the world is safe enough before they can venture back out onto the surface. It follows the story of one of the scientists working on the project and how they have developed something called the Oyster, which allows people to feel happiness and pleasure again for certain amounts of time while hooked up to a machine. But is it a good thing or a bad thing? Only one season has been released so far. I can't wait to see where this story goes. The next one is called Darkening Night. This is an anthology of creepy, dark, sometimes gory, short horror stories that all fall together under the umbrella of a project called Project Cyclops. At the end of each season, you see how all of these random stories fit together. The first two seasons are pretty good. The third season, definitely not as good as the first two. So that's something that you may want to check into. If you listen to the third season, it's entirely up to you. But honestly, although the three seasons kind of have one arc that goes through all three of them, you can get away with listening to each season individually, and it'll still make sense. Next up is The Edge of Sleep, starring Mark Fishbach, or as he's known on YouTube, Markiplier. He has a very distinctive voice, that's why he's cast in the lead role. But this takes a look at what if one day everybody who fell asleep suddenly died. What would happen to the few people who survived, who managed to stay awake, and how do they manage to save themselves? And also, how do they figure out exactly what's going on? So this is that story, and it is currently being produced in Canada as a series for TV. So if you would like to get the full story before that comes out, if you want to hear it before you see it, definitely check out this podcast. And finally, in the story category, there is the relatively new podcast called Ronstadt. This stars Rhett and Link from Good Mythical Morning, and it is about a guy named Ronstadt who manages to develop the ability to see the paranormal. He moves out to California to start over and takes a job in a 911 dispatch, taking on the calls that seem to be a little bit strange. He's getting extra training from a witch named Hattie, and there's only a few episodes out so far, but they are very quirky, very off the wall, and very fun. So if you're into a little bit strange stories, then definitely check this one out. Next up, we have the podcasts that are just about this, that, and the other. First, let's talk about Behind the Bots. The Behind the Bots podcast focuses on the TV show BattleBots and on all other combat robotics that's going on around the world. As many of you know, I am a big fan of BattleBots, and they look at some deep dives into each episode. They have interviews with team captains and builders, with the crew of the show. They take fan questions. So it's a whole lot of robotics, a whole lot of fun, all in a 1-hour show. So if that's something that might interest you, definitely check that out. Where are my Lord of the Rings fans? Because you are going to want to check out The Friendship Onion. Dominique Monaghan and Billy Boyd, who you may remember played Merry and Pippin in the Lord of the Rings movies, have been best friends ever since they met on set. And they now have a podcast together where they discuss Lord of the Rings trivia. They try new foods from around the world. They talk video games. They talk career things and talk about their stories and travels together. It's super fun and kind of nerdy. It's just overall hilarious. So this is one that's relatively new. They're about 6 or 7 episodes in. You're definitely going to want to listen to this one, especially how they tackle listener questions. Very funny. Next up is the Hey Heather podcast. Now, during lockdown, Heather Edwards decided that she wanted to start a podcast in which she tried to interview as many people named Heather as she could possibly find. So she started contacting people who then contacted other people and so on. And now her podcast is a bunch of interviews with women named Heather. So it's actually a lot more interesting than it sounds. For example, I found out that there are a lot of Heathers that are involved in the health and wellness industry. Who knew? So if you are the type of person that likes listening to people chat about their life stories and their passion projects, then this is one that's very relaxing, very easy to listen to, and kind of fun too. And last but not least, we have the Little Bit Grim podcast. So these are two best friends, Jenny and Taylor, who just like to chat about the strange and unusual. And each episode is themed around something different, something paranormal, a bit of folklore. They'll do true crime. They'll do mashups in which they'll talk about both the fact and fiction part of various urban legends and myths. So if you are into the spooky and unusual and would like to get both the facts and the fiction all about it, then definitely check out A Little Bit Grim. So there you have it. There are 10 more podcasts that I listen to while I run. Do any of these sound interesting to you? Why don't you let me know down in the comments below? Or maybe you have a podcast that you listen to that you would like to suggest to everyone. Make sure that you let us know. You can also give this a big thumbs up. Either one of those can help us find more runners out there who want to join the Geek Den. You can also follow me on social media. All the links are going to be down in the description. You can find me across most platforms under the name Running Geek Girl. Thanks so much for watching. I can't wait to see you next time, and I hope you're having a great week. Happy running.